Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Is this on? It is on. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today to the 24th Remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King. Just curious, how many of you were here last year? Remember that? We kind of were wondering, I think, what was going to happen. We weren't sure. I think we kind of know now. And it's not a happy time in many respects. But as I was watching the slides of Dr. Martin Luther King, his quotes, I was reminded that though he operated in our collective memory, though he operated on a national stage, I don't think that we can forget that what he did was encourage people to act in their local communities. I mean, that was what he taught us. When he talked about nonviolent resistance, he wasn't talking about it at a theoretical national level. Sit-ins didn't happen in Washington, D.C. They happened in communities all over the U.S. Marches did not occur, though a few did in the Capitol. Most occurred in communities just like this. The fight for civil rights, the fight to end exclusion, cuts through the heart of every community. And so while we live in these times when at a national level we see a backsliding, we live in these times and at the national level we see words and actions that remind us that progress is a very fragile thing. When we see that at the national level, let's not forget that we have one another here in our community. And this is where change has to happen. This is where the dreams of Dr. Martin Luther King will come true. This is where we will stand against a tide to make a difference, whether it's in the area of just policing, whether it's in the area of reduced bullying, whether it's in the area of finally dealing with mental health and addiction issues for those in our population who are without shelter and in need. In all of these areas, we will accomplish the dream here. We have to accomplish the dream here. We can't wait for the dream to be accomplished out there. And with that, I just want to say again, welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating in a memory, and thank you for participating in hope going forward. The Human Relations Commission of the City of Davis has put together a wonderful program. You will be blessed. I would ask you to just take a moment of silence for our sister Tansy Thomas, who passed in this year, who was a leader. Let's just take a moment to remember her, and then we'll continue. Thank you very much.
Baby. Thank you so much. That was really great. Thank you, Afrovibes, for your welcome performance. We look forward to seeing you back on the stage later in the program. I am Elizabeth Mosley, and I'm a member of the Human Relations Council for the City of Davis. And we just want to take a moment to recognize we have other Human Relations Council members here, and we are fortunate to have here today Yolo County Supervisor Don Saylor. Thank you. Assembly Member Cecilia Alguiar Curry. Our very own mayor, as you guys seen earlier, Robb Davis. Lucas Frericks, a city council member. And school board member Tom Adams. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I'd like to introduce the children of the parents of African American children Davis. PAACD is a social group that brings together parents, caregivers, and kids for friendship, support, and fun. They welcome working and at-home parents and caregivers to join to build lasting friendships, create a supportive community, grow together with the children, and celebrate our African American culture and heritage. Families from all neighboring communities are welcome. Today, the children will read, "I Have a Dream."
I am happy to join with you today and what will go down in history. As the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land.
So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check when the architects of our republic wrote down the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. They were signing a promissory note to which every American was to follow heir. This note was the promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, and so far for citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment.
This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
But there is something I must say to my people, who stand on the worn threshold what leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty for our wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a district of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make a pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors and of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto into a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped from the selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote. and the Negro in New York believes that he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations.
Some of you have come fresh from nail jail cells.
Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow the situation can and will be changed.
I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
Okay. It is a dream deeply rooted within the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, women, and children are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I have a dream today. I have a dream.
I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers.
Okay, you have another line to do. You guys, come on. Woo, come on. You're good. You're good. Come on.
I have a dream today. I have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
This is our hope. This is the faith where I go back to the Southwest.
With this faith, we will be able to hear out the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jingling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. 'Tis of thee I sing, land of my fatherland, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring, and for America to be a great nation, this must become true.
So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York.
Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring from the
Lightning Allegheny from Pennsylvania. At Freedom Ring from the snow-capped Rocky from Colorado.
Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Thank God Almighty, we are free at last! Standing ovation!
Oh my gosh, those guys were so adorable. They were phenomenal. That was great. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to welcome Nkechinyere Chidi-Ogbolu. Nkechinyere Chidi-Ogbolu is a chemical engineer with a bachelor's degree from the illustrious HBCU Howard University. At just 14, she began studying at Howard. And after graduating, yeah, did you guys hear that? 14. Yeah, okay. And at 18, after graduating with honors, she published her first book, Tales of an Uber Minor in College. Okay. Only one of these days, maybe. That's incredible. It was motivated by her mother, who saw her as an opportunity to inspire others through her story. Nkechi is now a biomedical engineering Ph.D. student at the University of California, Davis, with a focus on tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. She chose to go into Ph.D. in the medical field so that her research could have an impact on a broader scale than that of a one-on-one doctor-patient relationship. With the launch of her book, she hopes to inspire young people all over the country and beyond to be exceptional. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today and to be sharing my stories and experiences with you all. My name is Nkechinyere Chidi-Ogbolu. I am 18 years old and I'm a chemical engineer, graduated from Howard University in Washington, D.C., so shout out to the Mecca. I am an author and I've written a book titled Tales of an Uber Minor in College, which basically details my experiences in college from the ages of 14 to the ages of 18 and discusses things like scholarships, mentorships, and parent-child relationships. That whole paragraph was basically the very rehearsed part of my speech. I can say that if you wake me up from sleep, I can probably say that probably verbatim, because over the past couple of months since I've graduated, I have said that part several times because it was weird. when the news first broke out about my graduating from college at 18 and going further to obtain a PhD, I was happy by the fact that people were so celebratory with me. I was very, very happy about that, but I was also kind of surprised because in my eyes, I had never really seen it as something quite that spectacular. I hadn't really thought of myself as being extraordinary or special because I guess I was kind of brought up with the idea that being extraordinary is exactly what I'm supposed to be. I was kind of just used to, my parents had brought me up with that idea that the extraordinary is completely ordinary. Like there's nothing that you cannot do, there's no star that you cannot reach. And I was brought up with that mindset, so I guess in my mind this was completely normal. My mom especially was very into demystifying things that were looked at as tall dreams. She was the kind of person that would tell you that that thing that person has done that you think is so extraordinary, you should just try it and see what happens. Like when I did the SAT at 14 years old, she literally told me, you're just trying this. This is not serious at all. And I tried it, and apparently I did really well. She had brought us up in an environment in which my siblings and I were always encouraged to push limits and to break barriers, to become new standards. And I guess I had heard that so often that I had just considered myself as completely normal. It was when the news broke out and I had so many people congratulating me and so many people asking me questions about how they too can reach for stars and become more exceptional that I actually realized that, okay, maybe I did something a little bit special. It was also when I realized the importance of representation and using the platform that you were given to inspire others to their own levels of greatness. I had an official book launch over the winter break, so that was when my book actually became something that was like, this is real. And it held so much meaning for me, and it was really the happiest day of my life. Graduation is like a close second. It held so much meaning for me because I got to see the impact that my story was having on my society and on the people around me. I had the proprietress of my primary school. Her name is Mrs. Carol Akintunji. I used to look up to that woman, and this woman came up on that stage, and she said she was proud of me. She also said that she was inspired by my story to also make an effect to change in her own society, and that was something that brought tears to my eyes. I had the guest speaker, Mr. Femi Fanolo, who is the senior advocate of Nigeria. In case you didn't know, I'm Nigerian, just in case that wasn't clear. So he's the senior advocate in Nigeria, and he is a lawyer in Nigeria and a human rights advocate, and he said I had incited him to enforce the Child's Rights Act and also the Universal Basic Education Law, which would make primary and secondary school education compulsory for every child in Nigeria. And hearing him say that my story had incited him to do that, because one of the platforms I stand on is for encouraging every single child to attain their education no matter what that may be in, and pushing for every child no matter their background to have an education. And hearing him say that was such a moving experience for me. I also had the chairman of the occasion, Senator Babafemi Ojudu, who spoke of improving conditions in Nigeria so that the underprivileged are not neglected and pushed towards unseemly acts in their own efforts to survive. Students present on that occasion were also gifted with free copies of the books by my parents, because one of our efforts, it's in our own efforts to be a force of change and to encourage people to exceptionalism. When young people just like me would approach me and say that they too had dreams that they were told they couldn't achieve due to their social or financial background, due to their color, due to their class, but that now, seeing me, listening to me, hearing my story, they now felt that they could be unstoppable. They felt like they could fly. It was heartwarming. It ignited something in me that wanted to use my story and the platform that I had been given to propel others into their dreams. This was also fueled by my parents, my mom especially. My mom has always been a youth advocate. She would call herself the youth mama. She runs an organization called Croydon Consult, which is geared towards the empowerment of young people through the provision of information and the very many opportunities available to them to aid them on their paths to success. And she had brought us up in the mindset that there was absolutely nothing we couldn't do provided we had the right information. She had always wanted to impact the lives of people around her, and she passed that aura onto her children. My relationship with my parents was one in which I could talk about any and every single thing, including boys, which was amazing. My parents together are a huge influence on my life, and one thing I have tried to do is speak to parents as well and encourage them to develop relationships with their children beyond that of this authority figure that expects nothing but excellence from their ward, but one in which their child is able to communicate freely in a judgment-free environment and not have the experiences of their parents imposed upon them. Young people need mentors. They need people they can look up to and relate to and unburden to in a judgment-free environment. My book, Tales of an Uber Minor in College, I've said like Uber several times. Uber does not mean like the taxi service. I'm not driving Ubers around. Uber in this case is from the German derivative of the word, so it means like a super minor, because I do have several people that I know that went to college at the age of 16, so that's a minor. But then I went at like 14, so there's like minor, and then there's like minor, so that's kind of where I fell in. My book highlights the importance of mentors and how instrumental they were in helping me maintain my sanity in an environment that was so different from one in which that I grew up in. I was in college at 14 years old, which is a really fragile age, but if you asked me then, I probably would have told you that I was grown, so I knew exactly what I was doing, right? But yes, the book is like a look into my diary for those 4 years of college, and it's not preachy. I'm not trying to tell you, like, read your books and just study all the time. It's very raw, and it's a telling of my joys and my pains and my successes and my failures. And it's a book that's written so that it's very relatable and so that people can see that there's nothing particularly special about me, that they too have greatness in them, and you should not be limited by what society may have labeled you as, and in so doing place a ceiling over your own progress. You can always be the exception to the rule, and you can end up being exceptional. Success is achieved through information and the capacity to utilize it. I think schools and the media and every one of us should promote the idea of a total child, one who is as educated as he or she is talented, and one who pursues both sides with passion. It is important that such role models are celebrated in society for the development of children and young people, because we are watching, we are learning, and we are trying to emulate. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this event.
That was incredible. Thank you so much, Nkechi. Please join me in welcoming back Afrovibes. Afrovibes is a multicultural dance group that focuses on African, Afro-Caribbean, cultural and artistic traditions through a diverse range of modern and contemporary African music and dance forms. The goal of this organization is to demonstrate both the similarities and differences between the rich cultures within the African diaspora while catering to diverse identities on the UC Davis campus. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Is this on? It is on. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today to the 24th remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King. Just curious, how many of you were here last year? Remember that? We kind of were wondering, I think, what was going to happen. We weren't sure. I think we kind of know now. And it's not a happy time in many respects. But as I was watching the slides of Dr. Martin Luther King, his quotes, I was reminded that though he operated in our collective memory, though he operated on a national stage, I don't think that we can forget that what he did was encourage people to act in their local communities. I mean, that was what he taught us. When he talked about nonviolent resistance, he wasn't talking about it at a theoretical national level. Sit-ins didn't happen in Washington, D.C. They happened in communities all over the U.S. Marches did not occur, though a few did in the Capitol. Most occurred in communities just like this. The fight for civil rights, the fight to...
Times have I said wow today? Oh, wow. Can't find another word. Great job, guys. Thank you so much. I now have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Mariama Gray, whose talk is titled, Where Do We Go From Here, Davis? Dr. Mariama Gray is an assistant professor in the Educational Leadership Department at California State University, East Bay, and teaches in the Educational Leadership for Social Justice, Administrative Services Credential, and EDD programs. Her research interests include culturally and linguistically responsive school leadership, critical geographical perspectives on student discipline, and the education of youth of color. Dr. Gray is a fourth-generation Californian who graduated from Oakland Public Schools and studied Spanish literature and Latin American studies at Stanford University. Dr. Gray received her Ph.D. at UC Davis in education. She is a veteran Spanish and social studies teacher and former school administrator. A mother of 4 African-American boys, Dr. Gray has dedicated her life to realizing Dr. King's dream of educational equity. Join me in welcoming.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to make sure I do a good job of staying on time. So I want to thank the mayor and the City of Davis Human Relations Committee for inviting me to speak today, but I also want to recognize council members and county supervisors and the school board members who took time out of their day to be here. Can you not hear? I need to get closer. Okay, shall I start again? Okay. Well, I want to thank the mayor and the City of Davis Human Relations Committee for inviting me to be here, but I also want to acknowledge the city council members, the county supervisors, and the school board members who are also here as well. I really also want to thank my family and my friends for showing up today, and my family in particular for giving me the space to think through some of the things that I wanted to talk through with you today. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. It's so important to have these kinds of gatherings where we come together as a deliberate and an intentional multi-ethnic and multi-faith community to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. But before I talk to you and begin my address, I want to acknowledge the history of this place that we're in, that we're on Patwin lands. This is the land of the Patwin people, and in the same way that we remember the ancestors through our storytelling and photographs, and remember Dr. King's legacy through celebrations like these, it's important that we acknowledge the history of the Patwin peoples who lived here before we did. They lived here for thousands of years, hunted and fished. On the banks of the Poudre Creek, thank you. And today only 1.1% of Native Americans, 1.1% of the population of Davis is Native American. I think that's such an important thing that we remember them through the retelling of their stories and their histories. The Patwin are invisible in our story of Davis, which often begins with the story of farmlands and the creation of a university. And as the descendant of enslaved Africans, I can relate to this invisible experience that they're having here. In my scholarship, I try to make what is invisible visible. And so I've titled my talk here today, Where Do We Go From Here, Davis? After Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? In his book, Dr. King argued that we have the resources to eradicate poverty. He shared an economic vision for the country that included better jobs, higher wages, decent housing, and high-quality schooling. In many ways, Davis is like the South in the 1960s. The city is full of contradictions. Data from the 2016 census shows that the average household income is about $90,000, and for families, it's $137,000. And yet, 1 in 4 people live below the federal level for poverty. 1 in 4 live either without health insurance altogether, or with public health insurance that we all know is tenuous at best. The city's outward affluence masks a surprising poverty. Davis is a well-educated city. At one time, it was the second most educated city in the United States. And those who are doing well believe it is because of their own efforts. In Davis, like many cities in the US, race and gender, disability and class are predictive of achievement. Math is a key gatekeeper for a career in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And if you look at the district's test scores for students in 3rd through 8th grades, it shows that African Americans, Latinos, the poor, and students who qualify for special education have markedly lower math achievement than students who are Asian and white, Filipino, or biracial. If we track student achievement based on parent fundraising, we see wealthier parents ensuring the perpetuation of their children's privilege. Because we know what happens when schools are under-resourced, it is no surprise that Davis schools that suspend their students the most have students who are browner and poorer. So if Davis is to realize Dr. King's dream, it will need to contend with its inequities. What this means is that we have 25% of the city who are living below the poverty line. People who don't have the same access that we do to clothing, housing, food, and leisure. People who make difficult decisions between food or paying a bill, between medicine and rent in Davis, between transportation and clothing. We have people of color who are being left behind when it comes to STEM, or for college at all, or for a career in STEM. People who over time begin to believe that they don't have what it takes to go on to college, to make it in the world in a high-paying job. Dr. King called this forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness. We have people who have limited access to health care or unequal health care. And as the mayor said, people who don't have access to mental health care, life-saving medications, or whose co-payments to see a doctor prevent them from seeking medical attention until it's too late in our city. We have mostly children of color who are being suspended from school, beginning in elementary school. And if you ask some of my friends who are parents of children of color, we really believe it's starting in the preschools. We know that just one suspension is predictive of more suspensions, lower reading scores, dropout, and is associated with involvement in the criminal justice system. We have a two-tiered system in Davis. And I'm not talking about Chicago. I'm not talking about Detroit. I am not talking about Oakland. I am talking about Davis, in our backyard today in 2018. We can get on any buses, use any toilets, drink from any fountains, but there's still unequal access in our city. There is an income disparity that was started generations ago, and it's going to take a lot to get where we want to go. The problems and inequities I present may seem like they are large and complex, and they are. But Dr. King provided a blueprint for a beautiful, multiracial America in which we all share in a common freedom. And Davis has a highly educated and experienced population that will benefit who can think through and make the changes that will benefit all of its residents, from the poor to the punished. We are fortunate in the human capital from which we have to draw, but the bigger issue is that we first have to acknowledge that this inequity exists. We cannot pretend that this is a problem somewhere else, and we cannot blame the marginalized. Given what we know about Davis's inequities and the racial, economic, and gendered history of the United States, we will need to think about what changes we can make and how we can approach them. We can make a difference and create a more equitable and just society for everyone in our community if we all do our part. Earlier, I told you that I make the invisible visible. What I really mean is that I talk about things that people would rather ignore and make invisible because they are uncomfortable, inconvenient, or hard. Every fall, I get a group of 20 to 30 future principals from Contra Costa County, which is where I teach. Like Davis, the schools in that area are affluent, predominantly white and Asian, and serve the children of the privileged, highly educated, and powerful. Like Davis, the schools also serve a small group of students who are Black or Latino, poor, English learners, or have learning disabilities. And I'm not saying that all Black students are poor or have learning disabilities. I'm just describing all of the different kinds of students that are there. The program in which I teach has a focus on social justice in schools. One of the assignments is to examine an inequity in their school and design a plan for addressing it over the course of 2 quarters. We tell our students, school leaders cannot promote excellence in education and claim to be advocates of social justice if they tolerate cultures that accept and explain special education rates, suspension and detention rates, dropout rates, and low academic performance for disproportionate numbers of students. Social justice requires active work on the part of educators to change within school and out of school circumstances that have a destructive impact on shaping the academic, emotional, and social development of children. That's what we tell our students. My average student is a 40-year-old middle-class white woman who teaches public school. Many of my students have had little experience with addressing issues of inequity or advocating for social justice. Some have never even thought about inequity before or realized the enduring impact it has on their students. To help them, I have them consider all the ways that schooling may experience or marginalize students. We look at lots of information, including things like student grades, graduation, and suspension, just to name a few. The differences between groups of students horrify them. I always have a few students who have so many inequities in their school that they don't even know where to start, and a few who don't see any inequity at all. Everything's just equal. Eventually, they all find and decide to address just one inequity. This quarter, they're keeping an equity journal. They keep an equity journal about instances of their chosen injustice at their school. Here is an example of the things they hear and see. A student wrote this. Today in the break room, it was a normal day. I listened to each of the teachers complain about their day and share about frustrations with students. It all seemed normal until I started to notice that most of the students being complained about were male, and some, not all, were of a different race other than white. In a few weeks, they will facilitate a meeting with district leaders, teachers, students, and parents about the injustice at their school. For many, it is their first time learning how to facilitate a group to address issues of equity and social justice. Some are afraid that they will be punished for even raising the issue, and others don't quite know how to start the meeting. A small group every year will not get the information they need to do the assignment because it will make a school leader uncomfortable. Over the next 2 weeks, we will talk about how to prepare for the inevitable pushback they will experience, how to listen deeply so that they might find a starting place for change. In my experience, they will all do just fine, and realistically, some will have an easier time than others. The ones who face possible backlash stay with me, as do the ones whose schools adopt their plans. My goal is to teach them how to make schools a more just place for all students, even when they get pushback. It is hard work, and some will come back from their meetings with bruised egos. But I know that they will get better at transforming schools if they persist. My job is one example of how I work to realize Dr. King's dream. After learning the results of a heartbreaking study that I conducted, I knew I wanted to teach future principals. In the fall of 2011, I began what would become a 3-year study of student discipline in Northern California. I was studying a high school. Initially, I wanted to understand bullying. I called up a high school and asked if I could study their school, and they agreed. After several weeks of observations in the principal's office, I noticed this trend that had nothing to do with bullying. I saw white students in the office serving as teachers' assistants and just passing through, and Latino boys who were being sent to the office for student disciplinary reasons. As I persisted through the year, I saw only one white student in the office for student discipline. I returned the next year and the next, and I saw the same thing. Mostly Mexican boys being sent to the office by their teachers. Now, we all know that this same trend has happened with African American boys and children. We've seen this over and over in time, but this one study was just about Latino boys. I took copious notes, we call them field notes, of my observations, and I recorded the meetings between the students and the vice principals. Sometimes when the school police officer, school resource officer was there, I observed him too. And that's an officer who works at a school. I stayed at the school for so long, I outlasted in my study all of the vice principals and some of the teachers. And without meaning to, I conducted the first study of Latino student discipline in the state. In the school where I conducted my study, the teachers and administrators, they said all the right things about believing every child can learn. But they held a secret belief that Latino students were somehow different from white and Asian students. And we can substitute Latino for my study for African American students because we know it's so well documented. The vice principals labeled Latino boys who were sent to the office as goofy freshmen who engaged in little impulse control stuff and believed that it was their job to teach them how to behave. While seemingly benign, each line of documentation had the cumulative effect of marking Latino boys as a problem. Latino students were keenly aware of the school's racial hierarchies and worked to avoid being labeled as gang members and troublemakers. Nevertheless, a handful of Latino boys who hung out by the bathrooms under the awnings were labeled as Sureños, and a handful of Latino boys who played handball were labeled as Norteños. The vice principal described them as, quote, very territorial and said that they had the intent to intimidate other students. The school resource officer added the potential bathroom users felt threatened because the boys blocked the way to the bathroom. Although a similar-sized group of white boys sat and stood in front of the library, effectively blocking the entrance with their bodies, only Latino boys were seen as threatening and intimidating to their peers. This use of a trope of the Latino gang member and the use of racially coded language like territorial, blocking, and threatening unmistakably associated the boys' Latino ethnicity and male gender with malevolence in the school and surrounding community, so they were afraid of them. It was a malevolence from which other members of the community were presumed to need physical protection. So the school surveilled the Latino boys and prohibited them from gathering in groups across the school, but nothing happened to any other group of students. Latino boys who challenged the unequal treatment received phone calls home, detention, and suspension. At the beginning of my study, I wasn't sure if what I was seeing was really happening. But once I realized I wasn't crazy, I had to think of what to do. During my observations, I began to ask questions of the vice principals that provoked them to reflect on their decision-making. I'm happy to tell you that as I continued to interrupt with my questioning, the vice principals in my study began talking about the undeniable racial trends in student discipline in their leadership meetings. I share these stories because I believe that the people gathered in this room are game changers in the fight for Black and brown liberation, in the fight for the liberation of the poor, the uninsured, and the disproportionately punished. You care about the marginalized and the oppressed. You came here because you not only believe in Dr. King's dream of freedom, but you want to realize it. It's not a speech to you, but a viable vision. And so to you, I issue a call. Each of us is called to do just one thing on this earth, maybe sometimes more, but just one thing. To leave it not only a little better than we found it, but to transform it. My calling is to teach about injustice in schooling and to advocate for political and social change. And I do that in my classes. I've always been this way, and I can't change myself. Believe me, I wondered what was wrong with me. I was trying so hard not to be this way. But that's how I know it's my calling. I can't be any other way. But you have a different calling, something important and work that only you can do. You must find work in this community for which you were called. It may be as a member of the PTA or boosters, ensuring that funds are distributed equally across Davis schools, or on a school site council to support the alignment of fiscal and human resources with demonstrated human needs, student needs. It may be to agitate for more affordable housing, childcare, or mental health care in the city. I don't know what you're called to do, but I do know that if we all answer our call, we will change this community. We will make a free and just Davis. In the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., let us stand up for freedom together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. It was very powerful. It brings to mind, too, from Dr. King, one of his quotes, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." Yeah, it makes me think of that. We're going to conclude our program today with music played by the ever-popular Davis Freedom Singers. When they are done, everybody is encouraged to participate in a short freedom march through downtown Davis. The march will conclude at the East Street Plaza. Thanks to each of you for joining us today as we celebrate diversity. Let us all work together to end discrimination in all its forms and to live the legacy that Dr. King left us. Also, I just wanted to let you know that if you want to see more of Nkechinyere book, Tales of an Uber Miner, it's on display outside in the lobby. Thank you so much.
So the Davis Freedom Singers are you. So we're all going to sing, right? But we need more people up here on the stage.
So come and join us.
So come and join us. There we go. First of all, is John Pamprin, is the first time I've not seen John Pamprin here. He's not here? He's not been well, but he's not here. But we have...
John Pamprin is ill. He told me to tell you that he's here in spirit and he's going to be back. He's just, his wife just had a shoulder operation as well.
Oh.
And so he's recovering, but if he could have been here, he would have been here.
Well, Richard, thank you for that report. And I hope you'll come up and sing with us, Rich. Come on. Bring the mayor with you. Come on.
More people.
Okay. Now, I want to introduce two other people that are up here on the stage with us today. They're very important people to me, and actually to every one of us here. First of all, I want to introduce Lisa Thomas, Tansy's daughter. Her mom did more, I think, over the years to continue to build this wonderful event that happens that we all thoroughly enjoy every year. So let's give her another big hand. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa's mom was about this close to being one of the members of the city council of Davis. Didn't quite make enough votes. 300 votes. But we worked hard, didn't we, Lisa?
Sure did.
Yeah. Okay. The other person that's here is the daughter of one of the people that went on the bus ride from Davis to Montgomery, Alabama, to join in the march with Martin Luther King there. And he was minister at the time of our Methodist Church here in Davis. Phil Walker, and today, this very day, is the anniversary, first anniversary of his leaving us and passing. So Phil Walker passed on this day 1 year ago. So I think it's very, very important that we give Wendy a big hand for being here. Where are you, Wendy? After she gets through being here, she's going to go back and join the family at a family gathering. But Phil was a super important person, did so much, not only in this part of our social needs, but in many, many others as well. So we're going to sing songs and get happy. That's the way, right? Oh, it was good. I tuned it before. Ah, that's what. That's pretty close.
By the way, folks, this is Dick Holtstock, who put together the Freedom Singers.
Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Free from fear and hatred.
Free from fear and hatred, I'm gonna let it shine. Free from fear and hatred, I'm gonna let it shine. Free from fear and hatred, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Everywhere I go.
Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
For the poor and hungry.
For the poor and hungry, I'm gonna let it shine. For the poor and hungry, I'm gonna let it shine. For the poor and hungry, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
All around the world.
All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
We shall overcome.
That was definitely sung down there in the South during that time. Now, one of the songs that was so important at that time is on the back of your program. So we're going to try to stick with that instead of the words that we make up in our minds.
We shall overcome.
So we're going to sing "We Shall Overcome." So that's what key is that on? That one's in the
C.
key of C. That's a good key to sing it in. Ron, you need to make your guitar sound louder somehow.
Here, Ron.
Oh, we shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome.
Hand in hand.
Hand in hand together, hand in hand together, hand in hand together someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We shall live in peace.
Oh, we shall live in peace. Oh, we shall live in peace. Oh, we shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We are not afraid.
Oh, we are not afraid. We are not afraid. Oh, we are not afraid today. Oh, deep shall overcome.
We shall all be free.
Oh, we shall all be free. We shall all be free. Oh, we shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We are not alone today.
We're not alone. Oh, we are not alone. We are not alone today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we are not alone
someday. On my way in G.
Well, we're going to sing a hymn, a great song that was sung all the time in the marches in the South, on every activity that Martin Luther King was involved in. What was the name of this one then, Carol?
On my way, key of G.
I'm on my way on the key of G. So we're on our way. So we're going to get started, a couple of verses here, then we're going to start walking up. And those of us that can make it from the top step to the bottom step without falling over and smashing our guitars, I got to walk down that step. I can prove I can still do it. Yeah. I'm on my way and I won't turn back. I'm on my way and I won't turn back. I'm on my way and I won't turn back. I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on.
Gonna ask my brothers.
Gonna ask my brothers, won't you go with me? Gonna ask my brothers, won't you go with me? Gonna ask my brothers, won't you go with me? I'm on my way, great God.
My sisters.
Don't ask my sisters, won't you go with me? Don't ask my sisters, won't you go with me? Don't ask my sisters, won't you go with me? I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way.
Gonna go anyhow. If he says no.